Soirée. Good evening and good afternoon to those of you joining us from the West Coast. Thank you for joining us for the next 60 minutes as we learn more about the makings of the new documentary film Nasrin and get a chance to speak with the filmmakers as well as with two women human rights defenders from Iran who now live in Canada. Je m'appelle Alexandra Idrich et je suis une militante d'Amnesty International et votre modératrice pour cet événement. It is an honor and a privilege to join you tonight from the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka in what is now known as Montreal. It is important for me as a settler to recognize the lands that we reside on, the historic and ongoing oppression of Indigenous peoples on these lands, and the actions we take as an organization and as individuals to address this oppression. Je vous encourage à écrire dans le chat le territoire d'où vous nous rejoignez aujourd'hui et à prendre un moment pour réfléchir aux actions que vous avez entreprises récemment pour lutter contre cette oppression et à ce que vous pouvez vous engager à faire dans les jours, semaines et mois à venir. Concrètement, pour lutter contre le racisme systémique et l'oppression des peuples autochtones au Canada. Before we start, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items. First of all, this event is being recorded. A link will be shared with participants afterwards. Cet événement se déroule en français et en anglais. Un service d'interprétation en français ou en anglais est disponible. Pour accéder à l'interprétation, cherchez au bas de votre écran l'icône en forme de globe qui indique interprétation. Cliquez sur cette icône et sélectionnez la langue que vous souhaitez écouter, soit l'anglais, soit le français. Si vous êtes bilingue et souhaitez écouter la conversation dans la langue choisie par chaque intervenant, ne faites rien et ne cliquez pas sur interprétation. This event is being conducted in French and English. French and English interpretation is available. To access interpretation, look at the bottom of your screen for the globe icon that says interpretation. Click on this icon and select the language you would like to listen to, either English or French. If you're bilingual and wish to listen to the conversation in whichever language each speaker chooses to use, simply do nothing and do not click on interpretation. Notre collègue Anna est présente ce soir pour vous apporter un soutien technique au besoin. Si vous avez des questions ou des préoccupations concernant l'interprétation ou d'autres problèmes techniques liés à Zoom, veuillez envoyer un message privé à Anna dans le chat. Our colleague Anna is here tonight to provide technical support as needed. If you have any questions or concerns about interpretation or other technical issues related to Zoom, please just send a private message to Anna in the chat. Comme toujours pour les événements Zoom, merci de fermer votre micro. L'événement sera une discussion avec nos panélistes. Si vous avez des questions pour eux, nous vous invitons à les écrire dans le chat tout au long de l'événement. Vers la fin de la soirée, je poserai aux panélistes autant de vos questions que possible tout en respectant les limites du temps. Nous voulons respecter votre temps et donc je m'engage à conclure cet événement à 20h, heure de l'Est. Feel free to take screenshots during this event and please do live tweet. The hashtags and handles to tag and some sample tweets are listed in the chat. And please do keep the chat discussions respectful. Amnesty International firmly opposes all forms of Islamophobia and condemns any and all acts of white supremacist racism and violence against Muslim communities. Any disrespectful or harmful comments in the chat will not be tolerated and will result in removal from the event. We hope you've had the opportunity to see the film Nasrin. Avec mon groupe d'Amnesty ici à Montréal, j'ai fait campagne au nom de Nasrin pendant des années, comme beaucoup d'entre vous, je le sais. Elle est une icône pour beaucoup d'entre nous. Mais ce film montre son engagement et son courage extraordinaire à travers un prisme beaucoup plus intime. Nous voyons Nasrin en tant que militante, mais aussi Nasrin en tant que personne, avec ses amis, avec sa famille. C'est très, très émouvant et très motivant. If you haven't already, please do take time to watch the film. You can follow the link in the chat to access the film on Apple TV, Google Play, or Vimeo. And now it is with great pleasure that I introduce you to our four distinguished panelists. And thank you, our dear panelists, for being part of this evening's discussion with Amnesty International supporters from across Canada. So I'll start by introducing all of the panelists and then we'll start the conversation. Marcia S and Jeff Kaufman directed and produced the Nasrin documentary. Marcia has also produced the documentaries Every Act of Life, The State of Marriage, Father Joseph, and the Savoy King. She has an over 3-decade career as an independent casting director and casting executive, serving 16 years as EVP for casting at Walt Disney Motion Pictures and 5 years as VP for casting and talent development at Warner Brothers TV. Some of her film and television credits include Clueless, Cujo, 30-something, Murder in Mississippi, 10 Things I Hate About You, The Princess Diaries, Romy and Michelle's High School Reunion, The Lookout, Enchanted, Oblivion, and Parental Guidance. She's received Career Achievement Awards from the Casting Society of America and the Hollywood Film Festival. Jeff also produced, directed, and wrote the documentaries Every Act of Life, The State of Marriage, Father Joseph, The Savoy King, Chick Webb and the Music That Changed America, Brush with Life, The Art of Being Edward Bieberman, and Education Under Fire, plus a number of short films for Amnesty International, programs for the Discovery Channel and the History Channel. He's also edited and designed a book based on the film Every Act of Life, contributed cartoons to the New Yorker magazine, and illustrations to the Los Angeles Times and the New York Times. He's written and illustrated several children's books and hosted daily radio shows in Vermont and Los Angeles. Mariam Shafipour is an Iranian woman human rights defender, now living in exile in Canada. She was a student activist in Iran and was arrested by Iranian authorities for her peaceful activism and spent more than 7 months in pre-trial detention in Evin prison, including over 2 months in solitary confinement. And in 2014, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison. She was released in July 2015. Amnesty International actively campaigned for her release, and since moving to Canada, Mariam has continued her activism in support of jailed women human rights defenders like Narges Mohammadi. Elahe Machouf est originaire de l'Iran et a immigré au Canada dans les années 80 suite à la répression politique du nouveau régime. Fervente militante contre l'oppression iranienne, elle est également présidente de l'Association des femmes iraniennes de Montréal, une organisation visant à briser l'isolement des nouveaux immigrants iraniens. And now, let's get right into our discussion. So I'll start with a question for Marcia and Jeff. Thank you so much for making this film, which so brilliantly spotlights the courageous activism of Nasrin and other women human rights defenders in Iran. I think this film means a lot to all of us who are watching, since Amnesty International has advocated on Nasrin's behalf for years, as she's been criminalized time and time again by Iranian authorities. Can you tell us more about Nasrin, about her activism, and how she has been criminalized?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for hosting this very special event. We revere Amnesty International and Amnesty International Canada, so it's especially personally important for us to be here with you. I remember just briefly when I was doing not so good TV documentaries, my personal goal was, how can I end up doing some documentaries for Amnesty International? So that led me on this journey that took us to Nasrin. We reached out to Nasrin Sotoudeh about doing a documentary about her for so many reasons. You know, she represented so many things that we thought were important for America, for the world. The fact that she supported religious minorities, that she worked on behalf of women's rights, that she she was a tireless champion for children and against the death penalty. And so in mid-2016, we reached out to her through mutual friends, and we shared a couple of goals. One was that we really wanted a film that would portray a community of activists in Iran, people like Mariam, who of all ages, who were fighting for rights in Iran. And through her, we could connect to them. The other thing actually connects to something that, again, involves Amnesty's core mission, one of your missions and goals, which is fighting against the demonization of Islam, Islamophobia. We felt that very distressing happening in the United States and around the world. And we thought through Nasrin, you know, Iran's culture and history is so rich and so full and so vital. And it's so important to Nasrin as a fuel for her work. So we thought portraying her story would be a way to connect people around the world to a sense of Iran that it hadn't had before. I'm passing to you.
I'm passing to me. No, I mean, you know, she's a remarkable individual. I mean, but you know, one of the things that we found making the film was the women of Iran are a particularly extraordinary group of women. I mean, I have to say, for activists in a horribly oppressive society that does everything, you know, to stop women from having their own voice and, you know, having the freedoms that, you know, they should have in any civil society. They're unrelenting in their fight. You know, they're so unwilling to back down. I mean, they do stand up, and they end up getting arrested and spending time in prison, as so many women have, and women are now. It was really remarkable to just get to know not just Nasrin, but all of the people that we met making the film.
Yes, that all comes across when we see the film. No, it's absolutely an extraordinary group of people. Just fascinating. Yeah. So yeah. I'll go to another question to Mariam. So you were a student activist in Iran, and you were criminalized for your peaceful activism, like Nasrin. Can you tell us a little more about your activism and how that criminalization of your activism impacted your life? I think you need to put your microphone. Can you put your microphone on?
Oh, it's okay now? Okay. At first, I just want to thank you so much to Jeff and Marcia. You know, you portray our pains and make people to understand us, you know. Sometimes I think we live under a lot of dark, you know, big, heavy things, and people around the world can't see us and can't understand our pain. And so you did a great job. I really thank you so much. Yes, about Nasrin. The first time I met Nasrin in person, I was a university student. I was young. I was 22 years old. And I really impressed by her courage, you know, because, you know, the first time I heard about she spoke publicly about what disaster happened in 1999, and she said there is more victims. We have more than one victim. There, 5 people disappeared and maybe murdered. And you know, she was so brave to not only said this publicly, but she followed up and just contacted with different families just to convince them to speak with her, to discover the truth. It's so, I can't find a word to describe this courage. Yes, Nasrin, Nargis, these are my heroes. And you know, they're very inspirational for me. About myself, I was a student. The first time I was arrested, I was just 22 years old. I had a blog, and I wrote about the daily life, especially about what happened in our university and about the atmosphere. The bad atmosphere was there near to the election 2019, and they arrested my friends. I just you know, wanted to raise my friend's voice up. And the second time, it was, you know, I just tried to be like my heroes, my Nasrin, Nargis. I just started to work on human rights and help people to, you know, to be heard, and file some documents about the people who murdered or injured or tortured or sentenced to prison. That's all. And yes, for the first time, my first court, I was banned to continue my education and sentenced to 1 year in prison. And for the second one, I was just 25 years old, and I was sentenced to 7 years in prison and passed 2 years in prison just because I tried to be a human. Thank you again.
Quite a story. So, Elahe, comme Mariam, vous avez quitté l'Iran en raison de la répression politique, mais votre expérience de l'exil remonte à plusieurs décennies. Vous travaillez aujourd'hui avec des personnes qui sont récemment arrivées de l'Iran. Comment l'expérience de l'exil, en particulier pour les militants iraniens, a-t-il changé? Est-ce qu'il a changé au fil des ans? Et comment est-ce que c'est resté la même?
Vous savez, pour la première fois, mon conjoint et moi, nous sommes arrivés à Québec parce que nous avions fait nos études en France et il venait ici pour se spécialiser. On est venu et on est resté 6 ans, les années 67 jusqu'à 73, et puis on est reparti en Iran parce qu'à l'époque, personne ne restait à l'extérieur du pays. Donc, on est parti et puis on a essayé de travailler, mais ça n'a pas été très facile parce que vous savez, à l'époque de Shah, nous étions actifs ici parce qu'il y avait une confédération des étudiants iraniens à l'extérieur de l'Iran et qui était très active. Donc, on a eu des problèmes avec le SAVAK, comment dirais-je, à plusieurs reprises, on nous a pris nos passeports et puis on avait des difficultés, des entrevues, tout ça. En tout cas, on est arrivé à travailler tous les deux là-bas jusqu'à 89. Alors, parce que mon conjoint, dans les années 80, il a été arrêté et puis, mais vous savez pourquoi il a été arrêté? Parce qu'on avait trouvé dans la poche d'un militant qui faisait une lutte armée dans la rue, l'ordonnance de mon mari qui était dans sa poche. Alors, il disait que vous êtes en lien avec ce groupe de Moudjahidines. Mais alors, il a fait 6 mois de prison, il a été torturé, en tout cas avec beaucoup de difficultés. Donc, par après, pour 2 années, il n'était pas capable de quitter le pays parce qu'on ne lui donnait pas son passeport, mais que tout compte fait, on voulait y rester, on ne voulait pas quitter le pays. Alors, on est resté, mais jusqu'à 89, mais on n'en pouvait plus. Parce que, vous savez, la répression est tellement forte. À tous les jours qu'il venait à la maison, il disait « Oh, il y a quelqu'un qui me poursuivait » ou « Il y a quelqu'un qui est venu pour me poser des questions qui étaient bizarres. » Et puis, mais ça l'avait marqué vraiment pour la vie. Alors, on s'est dit mais pourquoi on vit au moins, on va se donner quelques années de vacances pour respirer. Alors, on est venu ici, et puis ici aussi, on a commencé d'être actifs contre le régime islamique. Ça fait que depuis, on ne s'est jamais retourné en Iran, malheureusement. Parce que vous savez, d'être arraché de ses racines, c'est très difficile. Vous transférez une plante du sud vers le nord, et puis on ne sait jamais qu'est-ce qui va arriver. Il va sécher, et puis il n'y aura pas de bons fruits, ou en tout cas, même s'il survit. Alors, c'est comme nous. On arrive ici avec beaucoup de difficultés, on ne parle pas la langue, ou on l'apprend, mais on a un accent. Après, on parle de racisme systémique, et puis, vous savez, on a un nom qui est différent, et puis les gens massacrent le nom en prononçant, et puis, en tout cas. Mais vous savez, disons, on a toujours été membre de l'Amnesty, et puis avec des personnes qui sont conscientisées, on n'a vraiment pas de problème, mais la majorité ne le sont pas. En tout cas, maintenant, tous les deux, nous sommes à la retraite et on vit ici avec nos enfants.
Ben merci, ça nous dit qu'on a quand même du pain sur la planche ici aussi. Hein,
Et je dois vous dire que maintenant, les gens qui arrivent ici veulent vraiment pas retourner et veulent essayer de s'enraciner ici, et puis ils disent qu'on ne peut rien faire en Iran, ça ne vaut pas la peine. Et puis c'est tellement dur de cette vie-là, c'est vraiment l'enfer.
Oui, c'est vraiment triste parce que comme Jeff et Marcia ont souligné par ailleurs, c'est une grande culture, un grand pays. Oui. Merci beaucoup. I'll change the subject a little bit. Marcia and Jeff, this is a film about Nasrin, but it's also very much about her family and her activist community. Nasrin's husband, Reza, and their 2 children feature prominently in the documentary. So why, as filmmakers, did you feel it was so important to spotlight Nasrin's relationship with her family?
Well, I think there's several reasons. I mean, one which was both just sort of touched upon by Miriam and Elhe, which is that I think, for at least in the United States, people really don't know much about Iran. We tend to only know what we read in the newspaper, if you even read a newspaper. The major news channels here don't actually cover it. So we only hear the bad things, government to government. And for us, and as a theme throughout our films, I think it was very important to what we say to capture, the common humanity between people. That really, people to people, that's what we really are, human beings. We don't always see that. And that was very, very important to us. And something else I just have to comment with Elhe said, which is that making the film and meeting so many people, like Miriam and Elhe, who live in exile, it was also really important for us to capture the beautiful country of Iran, because I was extremely moved, and I am today, by the difficulties and the sadness of leaving a country, a beautiful country with your family and everything that you love, and having to move away because you just can't live there. So that was, part of the kind of well-rounded picture. And of course, we really wanted to make a very well-rounded portrait of Nasrin, and it's not possible to do that without really bringing her family into it, because it's a huge part of who she is. I mean, Reza, I always call Reza her Marty Ginsburg. Ruth Bader Ginsburg had a husband much like Reza, who was incredibly supportive and very confident in his own masculinity and his own place, was, really believes in Nasrin, supports her work, is an activist himself, and I think in many ways just makes it possible. She has a very strong companion in all these things. And also she really is a devoted mother. And that's another aspect of the story too, that I needed answered for myself, which is when you're a mother and you have children, as we have children, doing these things and ending up in prison, knowingly making choices where you can end up in prison and staying in the country and doing this work when you're going to leave your children. How is that? And I think you know, people say, well, isn't it a sacrifice? And, you know, I think for Nasrin, she doesn't really see it that way. I think she believes so much in the work that she's doing that it's such a necessary thing for her children and the other young women and the future generations of Iran that she does that. And I also just think as a character and as a human being in a story, you know, as a compelling character that, you know, as the focal point of a group of a lot of amazing women. These are not just women who are angry activists, you know, or super intellectuals or just lawyers. You know, these are very well-rounded human beings, and activism is part of who they are, that they do every day. But it's also, you know, mother, daughter, friend, you know, wife, you know, a person who loves art, a person who loves culture. They're very, very full portrait of what people really are. And that's why her family was such an important part of this.
I agree.
Oh, it was wonderful to see that. Incredibly touching, and to hear the conversation of Reza explaining that they had to figure out who was going to stay with the children while one of them went to demonstrate. And I thought, we have that conversation too, but the consequences are not quite the same if we go demonstrate, but very, very touching. So Mariam, as a member of the women's rights movement in Iran, what were your feelings as you watched this film? And why do you think women's rights activists in particular are being singled out for repression by the Iranian authorities?
Sorry, I was watching, I have a photo. Nima's, Nasrin's son, Nima, was as little as sat on my knees. And I just compared this photo with how much I guess he's a teenager now. Just, you know, I just thinking about that. Nasrin she can see how her children growing up, and it's so painful. Just that, sorry about that. And also about the film, you know, definitely people who don't experience living in Iran can't understand our pain. But this film helps us to, you know, it's just that you portray our pain and people can watch and get something with us. And it's very important to us. Also about the Nasrin, yes, we are talking about Nasrin, but I guess if she was here, she talks about her goals, not about herself. I know, I guess it's third time she has been arrested. And I know if she will be released tomorrow or next week or someday in future, she definitely will be arrested again because she won't be silenced because she has goals. And yes, we should think about what caused these problems. What caused, for example, if women are suppressed in Iran, if women are sentenced to jail, what's the cause? What happened? How we can change it? How we can help to change it? I just want to mention that, for example, in Canada, 2 years ago, the Parliament of Canada called Prime Minister to put sanction on people who violated human rights in Iran. And they had the list of 19 people. And one of those 19 people was Nasrin's judge, Qazimovi's. It's very important. As you mentioned, yes, I was in prison myself, and I was sentenced to 7 years in prison. And two MPs, Canadian Parliament MPs, speak out about me, and it was very helpful. And I was released after 2 years. Put pressure on government, special people who violates human rights, like Qazi Morise, sorry. He sentenced a lot of people to many years imprisonment or execution. If just target these people, it's very helpful. After protests 2 years ago, protests in Iran, if, for example, the governments around the world, if the public opinion of their, medias didn't speak loud, definitely Iranian regime execute many people. It just stopped them. Yes, they executed Zam, Navid Afghani, so many innocent people. But if the world keeps silence, they just, it's not something, okay, to talk about them. Okay, please release Nasrin or some other people. They don't do that. They should put pressure on them to do that. And it's not something be optimistic about the time. It's people's life. It's Nasrin's life, her children's life. We should do what we can to stop this as soon as we can.
Thank you, Mariam. And it's so important to know that we can actually do something, and we should all be doing it. So, Elahe, je voulais vous demander, en tant que membre de la communauté de la diaspora iranienne au Canada, quels sont les liens de solidarité, en fait, entre les militantes des droits des femmes en Iran et au Canada? Est-ce qu'il y a des liens et des communautés?
Pas réellement. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a des gens qui ont été arrêtés parce que faisaient des entrevues avec des médias étrangers et puis, ou alors des liens, et les gens, des deux côtés, vous savez, les gens ont très peur. C'est-à-dire, il y a eu des collègues qui voulaient partir en Iran et vider tout leur, comment dirais-je, laptop, et puis voulaient avoir aucun lien, on ne leur envoyait pas de email ni rien, parce qu'ils disent, on ne sait jamais, on peut se faire arrêter pour n'importe quoi, et regardez tous ces doubles nationalités qui se font arrêter, et puis sont des monnaies d'échange. Et regardez comme dans tous les pays, depuis l'Australie, la France, l'Angleterre, toutes les personnes qui ont la double nationalité se font arrêter pour des raisons vraiment bizarres. Et comme ici, Roman Routefal, qui était le prof à l'université Concordia, a été arrêté et puis elle aussi emprisonnée. Et voilà, par après, elle a été libérée, mais quand même, vous savez, on ne se sent pas en sécurité quand on voit des choses semblables. Et aussi, il y a beaucoup de gens, on ne sait pas s'ils sont envoyés et financés par le régime. Et jusqu'à là, vous savez, il y a eu plus d'une centaine de personnes qui ont été tuées à l'extérieur de l'Iran, surtout en Europe et puis aux États-Unis aussi. Donc, les gens disent « Ah, mais il faut fermer sa porte parce qu'il y a eu des gens qui ont été... » on ne sait pas, assassinés dans leur maison. À Toronto, par exemple, 2 personnes avec peu de distance, mais on n'a jamais su qu'est-ce qui est arrivé exactement, mais qu'avec les coups de couteau qui ont été tués. Donc, même non seulement en Iran, mais à l'extérieur du pays aussi, les gens ont très peur du régime islamique. Et je vois, heureusement, au Canada, dans les années 2008, le gouvernement canadien, c'est-à-dire c'était à l'époque de M. Harper, et tous les partis politiques à l'intérieur du Parlement ont reconnu le régime islamique comme, vous savez, les assassinats qui ont été faits dans les années 80 ont été reconnus comme le génocide contre l'humanité, et ils ont déclaré le 1er septembre de chaque année la journée de solidarité avec les prisonniers politiques en Iran. Et maintenant, on a vraiment, on espère qu'avec l'histoire qui est arrivée pour l'avion ukrainien, que vraiment le gouvernement canadien se tient derrière ces familles-là qui ont été tuées. C'est des innocents, c'est des gens très brillants qui ont été tués et par les missiles iraniens. Et maintenant, quand les parents vont là-bas se plaindre pour dire « mais pourquoi, qui a fait ce genre de crime ?» Ils disent « c'est ça, on les a tués, on a bien fait. » Que voulez-vous dire à ces gens-là?
Yeah, it's terrible. And then this whole issue of safety brings me to my next question for Marcia and Jeff. Excuse me. So you were not able to travel to film in Iran, and so people in Iran had to film it in secret, and I imagine at personal risk. So can you share with us about this process? And you know, at Amnesty, we always strive to sort of not inadvertently hurt those who are trying to help. So what measures were you able to take to ensure the safety of those involved in the process of creating and screening this documentary? Although I'm sure they, of course, wanted to do this, to spread the word.
It's an excellent question. And let me just, first of all, touch on one thing, which is, you know, talking about Amnesty, and also, as we all hear these stories, there's always that feeling, well, what can I do? And Amnesty is the perfect example that grassroots activism in each country and around the world can make a tremendous difference. And people in Iran, Reza's Khandan, Nasrin's husband, as an example, would be the first to tell you that that kind of public pressure from country after country after country, it goes up. It goes up from us to the politicians who then hopefully represent us, and it goes across the oceans. And so this is not a conversation that should stop here. It should lead to people signing petitions, becoming involved, and making sure that also our elected officials represent human rights as well. It's just kind of astounding when you think about civilization coming so far, and yet so many people just dismiss the very idea of human rights as being important, when actually it represents, you know, the core soul of what civilization should be. So, you know, we another reason to applaud Amnesty, but to applaud the process of Amnesty at the same time. And to go right to your question, speaking about Amnesty, because of previous films I'd done with Amnesty and beforehand about Iran, we couldn't go there without getting arrested. Even if we could, if you show up, you know, in Tehran with a big Hollywood film crew, you're not going to get really good coverage of Nasrin in a personal way. And so it was just remarkable. We were able to work with some very talented filmmakers who put themselves at risk as much as Nasrin did to do this film. You know, walking down the street with a camera next to Nasrin Sotoudeh, or as you'll see in the film, going into a bookstore, going into a theater or an art gallery, or being at a public protest with a camera with Nasrin Sotoudeh is not a safe thing to do. But these were talented and brave people. And yeah, throughout the making of the film, over and over and over again, we said to Nasrin and her husband, Reza, you know, it's not worth putting you at risk. And we will stop our work right now if you feel it puts you at any risk whatsoever. Even when we had, and we, you know, we did the whole film in secret, we fundraised in secret, we even edited in secret. And even when we were completely done with the film, we came back to Reza and Nasrin, who was in prison, and said, you know, we won't release this film if you don't want us to. And not only did they continue to say this is the most important way of getting our word out and encourage us to do it, but so did everyone in the film. Everyone in the film signed a full public legal release, as we do in any documentary, giving us permission. And so when you think about any of those individuals in the film who touch your heart, it wasn't just a casual thing. It was a purposeful act of courage that we're really grateful for.
And can I add also, the film has been seen in Iran. It aired the first time in November, actually, I think November 18th. And it's and now in Iran Wire showing it again this month, and they'll be showing it 4 other times throughout the year. So it's been seen.
Yeah, I should say it was shown through BBC Persia and Iran Wire, but
initially,
yes, yeah, but that obviously gets into Iran. It's in Farsi and around the world. And by the way, if you want to see the film yourself and find out how to do it, I saw a question on the chat about that. You can go to www.nasrinfilm.com. There's an Amnesty International petition there. There's a PEN America petition there, and there's all these accesses to see the film around the world.
En français, pour regarder le film, visitez le website, s'il vous plaît.
Okay, that's great. So thank you all so much for this incredible, wonderful conversation. And I am going to start taking some questions because time is running out. So I've got some questions here that have been written in the chat. So my first question is for Marcia and Jeff. So Nasrin is a part of a social movement, and she's the first person to say that she wants people not only to advocate for her freedom, but for the freedom of all other people jailed for who they are or what they believe. So has this film intensified support for Nasrin? And how have you been able to channel support for other jailed activists in addition to Nasrin?
I'll just start.
Yeah, start. Start.
It's a cooperative relationship, so we go back and forth. You know, it's really remarkable. Whenever Nasrin has had a chance for a public forum, even when she's been in prison, she has always used that light to shine a light on others. You know, it's never about herself. So when she won a judicial award in Germany, she spoke about other Iranian prisoners on death row. And she did the same thing when she won the Right Livelihood Award. And the film has been a part of so many of these events. We did a presentation before the European Parliament a few months ago, and then there was a statement on Nasrin's behalf afterwards. But every time Nasrin has a chance, she makes it about others. And really that's one of our missions too. Nasrin is a public figure and a remarkable one, but there are so many other prisoners who aren't well known, but are in just as much pain and just as much need.
Yeah, I mean, during this recent part of her prison term, I mean, she went on 2 hunger strikes. The first one was a brief one, to help. Her cellmate was an elderly woman, and that helped get this woman out of prison. And then over the summer, she went into a 47-day hunger strike, which was absolutely terrifying, because of course we were worried every minute of every day that, you know, she would not make it, and she has a heart condition. She since had been able to have an angioplasty, but this was specifically to bring pressure on the authorities because of COVID in the prisons. You know, that is why she did it. And of course, the whole world was talking about this woman on this hunger strike every single day in a prison where there was COVID. And it really brought a huge amount of attention to the problem there.
Can I just add one quick thing, which is that as we talk about Nasrin turning the light on others, we also think it's really important to always say that you can't call for human rights in one country without looking at your own country. And so as Americans, having gone through 4 years of hell, but realizing also that, frankly, American violations to human rights go back decades and decades, it's really important for us to say, we start with ourselves, and that gives us moral standing to speak about others. And I think every single country needs to look at themselves and say, how can I apply these principles to our country as well?
Absolutely. Yes. Going back to Nasrin's health, that is the question I have here, is what is her health? What is the state of her health now? And how about her husband? Because it sounded like maybe he was going to be sent to prison. How is he? And are her children safe? How is the family?
Well, Marcia was mentioning that Nasrin had been on a 47-day hunger strike, and she had a bad heart before that. and that really exacerbated that condition. So briefly, she was in a hospital while she was in Evin prison. Then she was back in Evin. And one day the authorities said, oh, we're going to take you to another prison so you can get some treatment. They put her in a car, but rather than take her to a hospital, they tricked her. They lied to her. And they took her to Garchak prison. Garchak prison has a reputation of being the filthiest, most dangerous prison for women in Iran. I was just reading about another political prisoner, Sabah Afshari, who just came down with COVID last week. There's apparently a whole rampant outbreak of COVID in Garchak right now. And a week after Nasrin went to Garchak, she got COVID. And when she was released on a medical leave, her whole family got COVID. So she's doing better now, but she is in a very, very, very small windowless cell with 12 prison beds in a room that's about 8 feet by 13 feet. And it's horrendous conditions.
Absolutely. And so I believe I remember she's condemned to 38 years of prison and lashings. And
Yes.
so somebody has asked, what did she do to get such a harsh sentence? Well, officially.
Well, nothing really. What did she do? What did she do?
What did Mariam do?
But,
She stood up for freedom.
Eli's talking about, a coin in a person's pocket. It's ridiculous. What she did was she stood up for the rights of women to express themselves freely, to have their own voice, to not wear the mandatory hijab. As while we were making the film, the Girls of Revolution Street movement began, which was the young women taking off their, headscarves in public to protest the mandatory hijab law. And she had clients who, she was defending, and she went to prison for that. The charges are ridiculous, like prostitution and inciting all kinds of things. When simply, one of my favorite things in the movie is, it's like she talks about this little piece of cloth, how they control us with this. And I think, she was fighting for people's rights to define their own lives.
You might remember a scene on the steps of the Iranian Bar Association, and her colleague and friend, Dr. Farhad Mezameh, is with her, almost gets arrested. She pulls him out of the car. He's also a close friend of Reza. He got arrested for wearing a pin that said, "I oppose the mandatory hijab." And for wearing that pin, they threw him in prison, and he now has COVID in Evin prison. So the question, what did they do? They stood up for rights that we should all have. And
Reza's home right now. He's home on bail. He's home. The kids are home. For now, they're okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Has Nasrin seen the film?
Yes, she was able to see the film. Reza had seen the film first. He watched it first, and then he showed it to the kids. And then when she came home the first time on her medical furlough, she saw the film. And then when she was feeling able to talk, she was wearing her mask, and she called us, and she was, the first thing she said about the film was that she was so pleased that, we were able to capture the work of all of the women. And she was that's what she wanted to talk about, that, we did do this portrait of so many, like Nargis and Shirin and Manzareh and others who were so active in the movement. And that we Americans from so far away actually wanted to tell their story. And then she was really funny because she says, well, when I send you all that choppy footage, because of the handheld camera, she says, I didn't know how they could never make a movie out of that. So she was very sweet about it, and she was very, very happy, that it had turned. I don't know, we're so far away. Although we've grown very, very close to the family, and we're in touch with them regularly. It's hard to imagine, because it also took almost 3 years to make the film, and then another year to go through this process of releasing the film. There's a lot more to it than, what people really realize. And I'm sure when we started this, that no one, that, the idea that really there was really going to be a real movie, I don't know, that was exactly, imagined as it turned out.
Yeah, I just have to say, these are such good people. I've done films about people who maybe weren't so good, and I've used to interview a lot of politicians who were publicly great, but not so good personally. But Nasrin and Reza, they're the real thing. Such good people. And no matter what they're going through, they always ask how you're doing. There's always time to make a joke. There's always time to talk about family. Yeah, it's just, it's heartbreaking what they're going through.
Can I add one thing? Miriam said something really, really important, you know, about what people were doing on her behalf when she was in prison and the difference that it made for her, you know, in terms of getting out in a timely manner. We've also worked with Jason Rezaian, you know, who with the Washington Post, who'd also been, and, you know, again, you know, there was a lot done on his behalf too, the noise, you know, and that's something, you know, it's just really, really important. You know, they'd like everybody to be silent, but that is not the way. I mean, to not be silent is the way to really help people.
Absolutely. So you say the film was shown in Iran, I guess on BBC. Was this sort of secret, or was the regime aware that this was going on? And what was the reception like? Do you know how the film was received?
You know, people in Iran can see a lot of things if they want to, and so the Farsi version could be seen in Iran if you so desired. And yeah, we've heard very positive feedback from individuals who are inclined to support Nasrin and Reza's cause and others like them. The regime itself has expressed some displeasure, but has really been fairly muted. But on their hand, their actions speak for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And what has the reception of the film been like in the United States?
You know, gratifying. It's amazing to. There's a group, for instance, called Friends of Nasrin, who bring so many people together, and there are other groups that don't have official names but are like that. And it's just, you know, it's such an honor to have a chance to connect to so many activists and so many good-hearted people who care. And it's been an amazing journey.
And also to get to really know, you know, the large Iranian diaspora. I mean, you know, we, as Jeff was saying, when we made the film, you know, we were very secretive about it because for reasons we've explained. And once the film was seen, then people in the Iranian community, you know, started to see the film, and you know, we've been, I mean, very moved by what people have had to say to us.
So Mariam, you've advocated on behalf of jailed women's rights activists in Iran, including Narges Mohammadi, who was released from jail a few months ago. Now that she's been released, do you know if Narges has been able to restart her activism? And what role, we'll get back to this, did international solidarity and action play in securing her release?
Thanks for your question. At first, I just wanted to add something. Definitely Nasrin's family are targeted. Her daughter, when she was so little, when she was 13, she was banned to leave country. And just a few months ago, 3 months ago, she was called to court. She's now 20 years old, or their family bank account was blocked. You know, they try to hurt you in every way they can. And also about the question you asked about the Narges, yes, she, you know, both of them are definitely like each other. No one can stop them. Yes, she starts her activities, but you know, she's waiting for her court. Yes, there is a new case for her, and yes.
Well, this has been such a wonderful discussion. I think, unfortunately, we're running out of time. So we are going to go on to the next part of the event. So just to sum up a little bit, Nasrin's courage and tireless activism and deep generosity have been a source of inspiration to me, and I know everybody in my Amnesty group for years. And seeing the film has really fueled my drive to continue to advocate for Nasrin and for so many others like her, and hearing you all speak. So I really want to thank, from the bottom of my heart, all of our panelists for sharing with us and for all you do and all you've done to advocate for human rights It's truly inspirational and a real source of hope. So, of course, no Amnesty event would be complete without the opportunity to channel all of this collective frustration, rage, but also humanity into action. So please take a moment to sign our online petitions in English and French. Links are in the PowerPoint on the screen. And paste it into the chat. And if you're on Twitter, please take a moment to send the tweets in the chat to Iranian authorities. If you've already signed all the actions and tweeted and want to do more, take a moment to share the online petitions on whatever social media platforms you're on. You could email them to friends and encourage them to watch the film and take action. So before concluding, we'll just take a little pause to let everybody take action. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining tonight's discussion. I want to thank again our panelists, and I want to thank everybody who's watched the film. And if you haven't watched the film, please watch the film. It's just wonderful. And thank you for taking action in support of Nasrin and other human rights defenders in Iran. Vous pouvez compter sur Amnesty International pour continuer à plaider en faveur de la liberté et la justice pour Nasrin, pour Athena, pour Yasman et pour toutes les militantes des droits des femmes qui continuent à militer, malgré les risques, en faveur de l'égalité pour toutes et pour tous. And as our panelists have said, please spread the word. Please continue to make noise. Please write to your politicians, sign petitions, tweet, put things on your social media. The more people stand up and support Nasrin and all the other incredibly courageous human rights defenders around the world, the greater the chance for change. So I'll just conclude with the words of Nasrin. Our children must not inherit silence. Thank you, everybody. Merci.
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 Au revoir.
Au revoir.